You're listening to the Bleeding Goat Podcast. In this episode, we cover the Banshee. Quick reminder, the goal here is to look at the lore provided in the 5th edition Monster Manual and see how we can use that to tell stories our players can engage in. First and last warning, if you're some kind of Banshee purist, if you know anything at all about Banshees from other sources like folklore, just throw it out the window. The 5th edition entry feels like it was written using autocomplete on your phone, which admittedly is still more prep than I've done before some games. The Banshee are described as luminous, wispy forms, with wild hair and rags for clothes that dance about a humanoid figure. They are known for their cries and woeful lamentations. It says they are malicious spirits born from the soul of a female elf. There's no stated reason why Banshee is a female, nor why elves, and while that may not seem like a big deal, it kind of is. Banshee in folklore are specifically women, and include women of various stages of life, from virgins to mothers who died in childbirth, to old women, all for various reasons that help tell the story. But ultimately, they seem to be women specifically because their sorrowful cries are meant to be harrowing to the listener. It's a male-dominated point of view. My point is, whether or not you're okay with Banshee being elven women exclusively, or that feels a little like projecting gender roles onto your game, that's up to you and your players. What is relevant, I think, is making that detail relevant as a storyteller, and that simply isn't done in the Monster Manual. You could read every other heading in the Banshee entry, and neither race nor gender play a factor. So let's talk about how a Banshee comes to be. The book says Banshees are the result of a curse afflicted upon an elf who failed to use their great beauty to bring joy to the world. Instead, they used it to corrupt and control. One afflicted with the curse loses the ability to derive joy, and the presence of the living causes distress. They retreat from the world, their health deteriorates, until death ultimately turns them into undead monsters. Eesh. That does read a bit like a deity's version of telling a woman to smile more, or else. That aside, how the curse itself takes hold and its effects over time are pretty well described. There's a fantastic opportunity in a long campaign to introduce an NPC and gradually have that character devolve into a Banshee. Bonus points if that character is a relative built into their backstory. Also, there's something to take away from the heading itself, Divine Wrath. The book mentions a curse, but it doesn't define the curse's origin. That gives us freedom to craft our own, probably of divine origin, as the heading suggests. But we'll come back to that after we cover the next two headings. The next two headings are Sorrowbound and Beauty Hoarders. Banshee are tied to the place where it died. They can recall every detail of their life, but they refuse to accept responsibility for how their actions led to being cursed. In addition, Banshees seek out fine jewelry, paintings, statues, objects of art, it says. Essentially the same vanity they had in life, just now cranked to 11 in the afterlife. Lastly, Banshee hate their own reflection. Any mirrored surface sends the Banshee into a rage, because it robs them of their delusion. And remember, they're vain. As a storytelling detail, hoarding things is great. Players too are hoarders. Any monster that goes after their stuff, or the same kinds of things the characters seek, gives us an easy way to introduce the monster. We should never forget that we have to give our players something to interact with. We don't want a lore dump if we can avoid it. A plot hook about an intricate talisman said to instill vigor and youth in its wearer, guarded by a hateful spirit in the dungeon of a castle, is winning, and highly ironic. But while the hoarding trait works on its own, we're going to have to do some work to make it combine with the curse's divine origins. Because who, in this case, is actually being cursed? Sure, the curse makes the Banshee's life miserable, but it also does harm to everyone else, permanently. The Banshee can't go more than 5 miles from where it died. It's undead, so it never dies, and it actively steals beauty from the rest of the world. The Banshee's curse is largely a curse for everyone else. The Banshee itself is just continuing its miserable existence. I would argue that the curse works best as a genre of cosmic horror. In the life the person unwittingly stumbled upon an energy that they accepted into their soul is now powered by it. Banshee are a form of lich, if you will, their life force being somewhere other. This gives us the opportunity for the Banshee to have followers, allies, or eldritch researchers. That said, let's try to honor the heading of Divine Wrath. Whether the curse is just a curse of one person or a lesson for an entire town works equally well. The story could be about a character's efforts to rehabilitate the town, or they might simply be there to lift it of the curse, i.e. kill the Banshee. Either way, we don't want to forget about those fickle gods. Even good people don't agree on the best course of action. It could be that the god who cursed the Banshee is not the same one ordering the characters to kill the Banshee. If I were a deity who found out someone else was using this Banshee as a scapegoat to steal magic items from my followers, I'd want to do something about it. Ultimately, that story centers on who's right, who's wrong, which deity do the characters favor, and who are they willing to upset. What makes it so compelling, though, is the effect it has on the world and the characters. If some folk rolled into my town and disposed of a powerful curse plaguing my land, I'd celebrate them as heroes. But if I preached a repudiation of material wealth, I'd be less thrilled. I want to take a moment to harp on the idea that the Banshee will never accept responsibility. It was brought up under the heading of sorrow-bound. I get it, but I think it kills some good role-playing opportunities. Chiefly, if your religion role informs the players that the Banshees can't be reasoned with, they'll just move straight to trying to kill it. At the very least, I want my players to have that good moral dilemma offered up by horror movies, where the priest speaks to the possessed child and ultimately must decide if expelling the demon is worth the cost or risk of the life of the child. Sure, maybe no one has ever been known to get a Banshee spirit to leave this world on its own, but there's a first time, right? I can imagine a cleric at least wanting to try. The Banshee is an intelligent creature. For better or worse, intelligence is tied to reason. The book says Banshee are vain manipulators and hoarders who denied or misused the gift of the gods. In modern society, we might call these people nihilists. In Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment, the main character kills an unscrupulous old pawnbroker to get her money and valuable objects, obviously, because he believes he would make better use of these and do more good. That to me seems like the basis for a Banshee as defined by the Monster Manual. In the end, the character in Crime and Punishment turns himself in. I'm not suggesting your Banshee has to become self-aware, but introducing these elements either through dialogue with the Banshee or through rumors in town, you offer some level of foreshadowing in your own game. Just why exactly are the characters in your game trying to kill the Banshee? For its hoard of wealth and magic? So they can do more good in the world? But I'm different, said the snowflake. We don't go a lot into monster abilities on this show, because how to run a combat isn't the point, and it still isn't. We want meaningful combats, we want the monsters to facilitate the story. In this case, the Banshee's abilities can help us do that. First though, I want to mention that the idea of a central and single monster in a labyrinth generally doesn't work well in D&D for mechanical reasons. You're not actually trying to kill most players, the monster is, but not you, the DM. Your characters have a wide variety of abilities themselves, and action economy favors the characters. For these reasons, even in movies, main characters don't die, weapons are generally limited in the beginning, and the party is either split physically or figuratively on what to do next. Fortunately, most of these hurdles are overcome by the Banshee's ability. The Banshee has a slew of immunities and resistances. It flies, and it can move through physical objects with some limitations. That allows the Banshee to be an omnipresent threat, even when it's nowhere nearby. Likewise, it's hard to gang up on a Banshee because it can pretty much leave at any time. See that wall? I don't. The Banshee has a horrifying visage, which can keep characters at a distance through the frightened condition, and provide opportunities to trap and separate the party. Even if characters flee, the Banshee can sense the presence of living creatures up to 5 miles away. Finally, the Banshee can use Wail once per day, dropping a character to 0 hit points on a failed save. Now, all this is pretty much game over for a non-intelligent killing machine. But the Banshee isn't. It's an intelligent creature with a mission. It wants your goodies. It wants other people's goodies. Killing characters outright might not be the best way to do that. So the Banshee gives you a pretty solid opportunity to pick off characters one at a time without necessarily being the end. That's a simple horror-esque, fight for your life story that requires next to no backstory and always plays well. To wrap up, the simplest way to use a Banshee is a haunted castle. Lure the players in with the missing noble. Fight to survive. Another option is making the curse about the effects on the people and then forcing characters to make tough decisions based on their religious backgrounds. And yet another option covered in this episode is using the Banshee as foreshadowing for what can happen to characters whose hoarder tendencies and moral certitude get the better of them.